G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode. This one's going to be a little bit of a tutorial explanation of how I built, or am building currently, my new wheels down here for America. So this is a little bit of a teaser in the lead up to my episodes that I will be filming for the World Human Powered Speed Challenge 2025. So this wheel, it's exactly the same size and shape and sort of layout, except there's a few little tweaks that I've done just to make it a little bit more user-friendly and lighter, just a little bit, well, the hub definitely lighter, but sort of modifying it just a little bit to make it just better. Because there's a few things on the previous design that I made mistakes with that I then had to go through and fix. So I'll explain with the rear hub firstly what I had to do, and then I'll move on to the construction of the discs and the front wheel hub and disc. So these hubs I got machined at a CNC shop. The previous one, I was still sort of fresh on my design journey and my, computer modeling journey, so I kind of didn't really understand the most efficient, cheapest way to do things. So when I had to machine it, there's this disc here. That slots over. Let's find a good spot for it. It slots over here and sandwiches the two halves together, right? So on the previous one, I had notches notched out with a CNC. I think it was 4 notches done. And then on here, they lathe milled it, but then they also left it a little bit, and then they CNC milled to leave little raised pieces. So when this clamped on, it would lock into that. So it's basically locked, with this side, the solid side, and this side as well, the non-solid side that just screws on and clamps it together. So that, those little tabs aren't doing much at all, and it just adds a considerable amount of design and just machine time that is going to cost a lot more. So that's the first thing I removed, because when you have a 7.5mm flange straight to aluminium, this thing is not going anywhere. You could hit that with a hammer and it wouldn't bend. So this is taking all the force of the entire wheel. With the other one, I also accidentally stuffed up the dimensions. So I didn't factor in the width of the rear wheel cowling when I designed it, so the brakes were butted up against the surface of the disc and not the surface of the rear wheel cowling. So I had to extend the width by probably about 10 to 15 mil either side, but because it's got this flange for where the disc bolts onto, I was kind of screwed. So what I had to do was machine up another piece that slotted over that, and then I used longer bolts to drive through the disc and onto that. So it's basically a spacer for the disc. But that meant that the bearing was recessed into that, and there was a longer arm of force between the bearing and the mounting point in the bike. So this one currently has only 5 mils. So with the other one, it was 20 mil of force, which it might not seem like much, and it's probably more than capable of taking the force. But, worst case scenario, if something bends even slightly, you're never going to get the bearing out. So, that's the new design feature, is I made it the width that it should be. So that's pretty much what I did with the rear hub. The front hub, kind of the same. This flange here was a little bit further back, so I just bored it out a little bit. to make it even with the other side. So the diameter here is the diameter here, and then this diameter here is the diameter of the thread where the free hub screws onto. You can see this little spacer here. That's because I needed a little bit of over thread space to run the thread off to a negative spot. So another feature with these is the old one I just machined straight through from this flange to the other side. So it was probably like 10 mil thick of wall thickness, but what I've done on this one, I wish I had it apart to show you, but I don't. I've got them to recess in on the inside, so there's only like 4 or 5 mil thick wall thickness around here, which is still quite a bit, but I do like it to be robust. This weighs about half a kilo, so yeah, I want it to be quite robust. So now on to the disc manufacturing point of it. So I've shown this in one of my previous videos and said that this weighs like 250 grams. So these two discs are like what I cut out of my old wheel is more than what these two discs weigh, So if you look at that, have 5 of them cut out. So these discs are considerably lighter. The hubs are probably about the same. So, I've saved maybe 2.5 kilos off each wheel, which is quite a bit. I'll get to that later. So you can see the construction, it's just wet lay up. So I just individually wet lay up each of these on just like a sheet of glass, and then just 2 sheets of glass with some weights on it just to squish it down. So that's 1 mil of carbon, then 1 mil of fiberglass, then 1 mil of fiberglass, and 1 mil of carbon, just to save on money. And what I did was I got glue, technically, I got that and just smeared it all over the surface of the disc. And then I put Nomex down and let it dry. And then I'd do the next layer and then do it. And then once I'd done that, I'd cut a hole in it, put it in a machine that I built, that I've still got over there, that black thing there. It's a machine that I built with like a router attached to it to cut the V shape in for the slot of the rims. Yeah, so it's extremely heavy, other than the Nomex being light, but so much glue, so much resin, so much carbon, way over engineered. And now I'm looking at this, it's like I probably couldn't have made it any lighter based off how many layers of carbon I did, which I'll explain very soon. But it is still so heavy, and I'm not super stoked on that, but it's considerably lighter than what I've got previous, which will give me less rotational mass, less mass to rotate up to speed, less mass in general for the bike. So all those factors. The previous one, because it's just flat disc like this, the plate was just mounted on the surface. And I didn't want that because, as you can see, it gives you like 5 mil of protrusion that you could save by recessing it in. So this one, what I've done is I've designed a recess in the disc like that. And then I've designed it with a beveled edge. So I've got like the bevel, which is the same degree as for the rim, and then the recess like that, which, as you just saw, fits perfectly. Oh yeah, absolute. Slight bit of play, but not much. Absolutely perfectly into there. So now, explain how I did that. This is my mold, which is nearly had it. So what I did was I CNC'd the foam out based off measurements that I've done. So I initially CNC'd the flange side multiple passes, as many as I could do. I think it was like 5 or 6 passes to get the best angle, which still left steps. So I just sanded it ever so slightly with my hand, because I knew that, sanding, it's not going to take much off. As long as those steps only just go away, I know it's not going to be out of round or, misshapen. And then I matched that up with the rim to make sure that it was actually perfect before going ahead and doing any more. And it fit perfectly into the rim, which is good. Then what I did is I flipped it on the CNC, and it didn't matter where the 0 point was, because on the XY axis, because I used a 6mm dowel to find the center. So when I CNC'd the circle of the flange, I just did one plunge pass on the center. So I knew I had the center. So when I flipped it over, I could align that, set my 0 point, and then all I had to do was set the Z-axis 0 point on any part like closest to it. Before I did that though, I went on the CNC bed, and because the bed's not like dead level, like when I built it, it's like got a slight little bit of play in it. I put down some 3mm MDF. I did a like leveling pass, so I made the bed level to the XY axis on the CNC. So I knew everything was going to be at least no more than, a quarter of a millimeter out. So when I did the 0, then I just did the, surfacing pass, and then cut the hole for the middle. And I cut the hole just a little bit too big, because maybe about a millimeter too big, because I wanted the carbon to not get crushed against the foam as I pushed it down. So I'll explain that. As I was pushing the foam down onto the carbon, I wanted it to be just like the perfect fit, so compensating for the thickness of the carbon. So after I CNC'd the foam, which is 90 kilos per cubic meter foam, I'm not exactly sure what type, I can't remember because it's been a while, this has been a long time in the making. I then CNC'd this bit in the middle here. So I measured the thickness of the rim, and I got a piece that was just a little bit bigger, and I CNC'd the circle and then did a flush pass across the top. So it was exactly half the width of the rim. And you'll get that in a minute. So this thickness here of this little flange is the thickness of the foam that's left in the rim after I take away the 7.5mm of the flange. So the rim is like 22, I think, and I take away this thickness, and then I'm left with that little edge there. So what I wanted on the disc, I wanted a layer on the inside, and then I wanted the V shape, and then that matching with the outside of the disc. So I've got 3 layers essentially, 2 on the outside and 1 on the inside with a V shape to support the rim. So that would mean that because that's half the thickness of a rim, that would be the inside. Then you've got the flange of what you've got left over. So you lay carbon down here and then up. Then the foam sits over here, and you've got the carbon sitting up with the disc bit CNC'd out. Then that folds back onto it. Then you put the top layer, which is the outside, and the carbon goes and matches down in that recess and meets up with the carbon from the inside that you've folded back. Then you put this thing through those 2 holes and then crush it together. So that's creating force on the inside of a disc. It's not crushing the foam because that spacing is the exact spacing. And then that essentially is the level with the outside of a disc. So what I did was I CNC'd an outside flange just to hold the rim. And the easiest way to do it is just to get a rim and use the rim as the mold. So I put the rim in like that, and then I put some Teflon tape over it just to give it the thickness that I'll need to compensate for any like carbon thickness and sort of glue. So I didn't want it to be too small. I'd rather it too big and then the glue compensate with the gap. And then you use that as the mold. Then I wrap this in a vacuum bag and suck a vacuum on it, so the vacuum's pushing down on the top layer into the mold, and everything in the middle is clamped down through that bolt that goes down through the middle. And then you end up with something like this. So you can see where the two surfaces have met and they are bonded together. And then the carbon here, which has been folded up and over, with the carbon laying over the top of it, and that's where it was crushed down on. So what I did, I wanted it to be as light as possible. So I did a few test pieces. I can't remember where I've put it, but I did a test piece with this, like essentially the 2 layers of carbon in the middle, 2 layers of, 1 layer of carbon on either end. Well, not layer, but carbon in the middle, and then carbon on the outside of the foam between. I did a test piece, and then, same as what I did here, just bash it against the ground and smash it and try and break it in a vise, just to prove how strong it is. And it's pretty bloody strong. So the mold's going to be flat because I've done it like multiple layers thick of MDF and plywood. The CNC was flat, so the foam's going to be flat. So essentially the disc is going to be perfect. That one is pretty much good. Unfortunately, the rear wheel is just slightly out, so I'm going to have to see if I can think of a way to true the rim up before I glue it up for good, because it's about 2 mil out, which is not good. But yes, that's pretty light. They're 500 grams each. 500 grams, so this entire wheel weighs about 2.5 kilos, with the tires and tubes and stuff on. So with the carbon, I did 2 layers of unidirectional 90 degree, so you can see the lines, the unidirectional lines there. So 2 layers of that, which is 100 GSM, super light and heaps easy to bend around the tight curve that is on the inside here. And then the outside, I did 2 layers of 200 GSM plain weave at 45 degree layup. So give it as much like directional load as possible. And when I did that with the inside, I also tried to compensate by offsetting it by a couple of degrees with the inside as well. So yeah, that's pretty light. It's 90 kilos per cubic meter foam, which is pretty light but really strong. And then yeah, as light of a carbon layer as I could get. I could have done 1 layer on the outside, thinking of it now, but I didn't want to under-engineer it. I wanted it to be as close to the limit as I could make it, but still be safe and strong. So yeah, these sit recessed into there, so now it's flush, and it's a lot lighter than the previous one. I even weighed the TPU tubes that I'm going to be using instead of the butyl tubes, and it came out, TPU was 40 grams and butyl tubes were 80. So, I'm saving 40 grams just in tube weight. And according to online studies, they're going to be a lot quicker than the butyl tubes. So that's how I made my wheels, or I'm making my wheels. I haven't even thought about picking out the seals of the bearings and like lubing it up with a bit of like low viscosity oil instead, because this bike's run inside a fairing, which doesn't really get dirty. But I could like pop it out, lube it up with oil, and then push the bearing seal back in, just so they spin a bit easier. But yeah, I don't know. I'll think about that. If I don't get over 80 miles an hour, if I get like 79, then that's what I'll be doing just for one run. But yeah, that's for discs, and they're so much lighter than the other ones. Can't wait to test them out and see how much faster they are. While I was getting some stuff machined, I also got the rest of the parts for my unfaired two-wheeler that I'm attempting to break a few world records on. I got this thing made up. It's like the intermediate gear assembly, and yeah, the bottom bracket is done as well. Cost me quite a few $1,000s, but totally worth it in the end. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, because more videos will be coming up closer to the date of World Human Powered Speed Challenge, and then, as always, a video every single day while I'm in America.